Alrighty then, seems like we're live again. Welcome to another episode of Dojo Live, and as you can see, we're broadcasting live from Nearsoft's Mexico City office. And for those folks out there who want to be watching us either now or sometime in the future, please bear with us. We have some background noise. They're kind of, this is the price that we're paying for growing at a fast pace. So we're kind of doing the wiring and such. All right. Well, today we're
I think just Carlos that froze up here.
Hey guys, yeah, I think we cannot listen him. Well, I just want to say thank you, John, for being here. It's an honor. I know you have been a developer for a couple of years. I know you recently started with your blog and talks. So why don't you please introduce yourself and talk about it?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. So yeah, I've been actually a software developer for about 15 years, I think, and then and recently, probably like in the last about 6 years ago, I started a blog called Simple Programmer. I had no idea that it would become my full-time career, and that's what I do now. Is I basically run Simple Programmer, and really, my focus is now really on helping developers to not just get better technically, but to really to develop all areas of their life, to become better rounded, and to really enjoy their lives better. So I focus really now on self-development, on helping developers to just achieve what they want in all different areas of their life. And I love it. It's the most fun thing that I've ever done. And I do that through the blog, through YouTube, through podcasts, and however I can help. So.
That's great. And today we will talk about learning anything quickly. So can you share us what you have in mind in that subject?
Sure. So, I thought I'd probably, we can kind of open it up and I can answer any kind of questions. I've got sort of some strategies that I follow for learning quickly. I've got a course that I created on learning quickly. I've had to do it.
Sorry about that.
Oh.
What did I tell you at the beginning? Hey, I might be kicked out. Sorry, John. I really apologize, but that's exactly what happened, I'm afraid. All right, so sorry, John, I interrupted you.
No problem.
But I guess you, Janet, and Yesenia, you were doing pretty well. So if I may, I'm just gonna continue with the introductions later because John has already started talking. So John, please talk to us about your chosen topic, which is going to be today how to learn anything quickly. John, please. Why did you decide on this particular topic? So go ahead. I am sure that our viewers are going to be eager to listen to what you have to say. Go ahead, John. The mic's all yours.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, in my career, obviously as software developers, like the probably the most important skill I think today is to be able to learn quickly, right? Because everything is changing so rapidly. It's just amazing how fast technology, it really moves at an exponential rate. And so I thought that'd be probably a good topic. I've had a lot of experience with this myself, just being a developer, but also I had a long year where I did about 34 Pluralsight courses in 1 year, and I had to learn a lot very quickly to be able to teach those things, to teach those courses and create those courses. Some of the information I knew, but obviously a lot of it I had to learn to be able to produce that much and to stay on schedule. So I've got some tips and some ideas. I figured I would share. We can kind of do this however would be most valuable to everyone here. Is I can talk about sort of the strategies I have. We can just you can ask me questions about it if you have questions about learning. However you guys want to do it is great with me. So.
Actually, before we start with this, we're talking here about learning quickly, and I want to ask you, how quickly is quickly for you?
Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. It really depends. See, this is kind of an interesting, I think, topic to discuss, because quickly is really defined by scope, right? And so what I mean by that is when someone says that I want to learn a topic, two people could say the same thing, that they want to learn the same thing, but one person has a very narrowly defined scope and one person has a very broad scope. So you know, one of the strategies in learning things quickly is really to narrow the scope down, to learn exactly what you need to learn and not any more and not any less. And so, you know, quickly for me, like I could probably learn a new programming language in probably about a week because I'm not going to learn every single aspect of it. I'm going to learn the 20% of that language that's going to give me 80% of the usage of it and know that I can look up stuff that I need on the way. Whereas, you know, if you try to learn 100% of a programming language, sure, it could take you a year or more to learn. So I think really, you know, when you talk about learning quickly, it's one of the key things is, you know, cutting out the unnecessary and really defining what is it that you're trying to learn. And a lot of times the way to figure that out is to figure out what are you trying to do, because when we learn, you know, we learn best when we are learning in order to fulfill some kind of purpose, to be able to do something. A lot of times someone will just try and learn something and they don't have a reason to learn it. They're just trying to absorb information. And when we operate that way, we don't know what to learn, so our scope becomes really large. And then also we don't retain information as well because we don't have something to apply it to. So yeah, so kind of a complicated answer to that to that simple question, but I think that's the important background, because you know, when you got to quantify it. When someone says quickly, you know, it really depends, like I said, mostly on scope than anything else, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Excellent.
I have a question following that, Pat. Do you allow me?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So being a little more specific, well, you know, these days there's a lot of information on internet, and we can learn anything or almost anything. So we need to learn the thing as fast as possible. So what do you think of these ideas? I don't know if you have read about it, of the 10,000 hours rule. That is the time that takes to learn something new, according to a famous book. Also, some people say that you need 10,000 hours to master something. And there's another idea of you only need 20 hours. Let's
Right.
say you practice 40 minutes per day, every day for a month, and then you get it. So agree, disagree? It depends of the new knowledge. What are your ideas?
Yeah, I mean, those are really interesting topics. I've definitely heard of both of those, and you know, and I think it's again, it's sometimes when we use language to describe things, we're learning, you know, in learning something, we don't have a whole lot of different. We need more words, right, for for learning, because it's not there. There's lots of different types of learning, and so like the 10,000 hour rule, you know, that's a good one, but that's really mastery, and I'm not even 100% convinced that that's necessary. I think it's like if you've done 10,000 hours of something, there's a pretty good chance that you've mastered it. And to me, mastery is really when something is more than in the mind, but it's in the body. So, you know, for example, when I drive a car, I don't think about driving a car. I don't think about the process of driving a car. You might say that I've mastered the ability to drive a car because I'm able to let I don't have to keep it in the forefront of my mind in order to do that. That operation just happens automatically, right? There's a lot of operations. Walking, right? We walk automatically. We've mastered walking. We don't have to really think about how to do that because it's so ingrained in us. So I think, you know, when we talk about learning things, and we talk about the 10,000 hours, it's really about those type of things where you could ingrain it into your nervous system, into where it's an automatic response. But it doesn't really apply to something like learning a programming language. Perhaps, you know, to be able to fluently speak a programming language, you know, you could have 10,000 hours. But I think maybe like if you think about sight reading music or playing an instrument. Again, those are things that where the 10,000 hours would have more be more applicable. But things that are going to require your brain to be working, like you're never going to get to the point, you could never get so good at programming that you could just type out code without thinking about it, right? You couldn't. It's something that you couldn't really master to that degree. So I think, you know, there's different types of learning, and it depends on the type of skill. You know, the things that can be done autonomously and be ingrained into your nervous system where they're an automatic response, those things can be mastered in probably 10,000 hours. I don't know if that number is quite so accurate. I think you can do it a lot faster if you do the techniques, if you do very good techniques for doing specific practice. But I think that applies to a certain set of things, and then the more logical things where you're never going to, you know, it's never going to be baked into your nervous system. Those things just require, they require a much shorter period to learn, because it's always going to be a mental process.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Janet, for your questions. And Yesenia, what say you? Do you have any questions for John right now?
Yeah, of course. In your book, Soft Skills, you mentioned in the part where you share your 10 steps to learn something, you mentioned that you need to know 3 things before to learn something new, some technology. And one of them is to learn the basics. So you have 20% of what you need to do in a daily basis, the 80% of the usage of the technology. How do you measure that? I mean, how do you know what do you need in order to make things happen if you really don't know the technology yet?
That's a good question. Yeah. So really, you know, anytime that I'm trying to learn something, I want to be doing at the same time, right? Because when you do something, then you are much more likely to learn it. And I talk about also that you want to teach it, but let's just look at the doing part. So when you're doing, if you're trying to learn something and you're doing at the same time, you'll quickly discover what that 20% is, because you're going to be using that. That's going to be the stuff that you're looking up over and over again. And so you know, I guess, you know, when you're starting out with the technology, it can be difficult to know what that 20% is going to be, but you can sort of look at, you know, let's say that, you know, it's going to be very case by case basis, but let's say that you're wanting to learn a new programming language. Well, if you already knew a programming language, if that's your context, then you would probably know that the 20% is going to be something around, you know, the constructs of the basic, you know, branching conditions, and how do you create variables, how do you loop, how do you do these basic things, because that's, you know, all programming languages have that. If you never had come into it at all, if you had no context, it's going to be a little bit harder. But you can look at code examples and you can see, well, what is being used, right? And that's, again, it's a very subjective thing, and it does depend on the context. But I would say that, you know, finding that 20% is going to be obvious, and it's not an exact thing, right? It's not going to be exactly 20%. It's a rough number, but it should be fairly obvious, because it's the things that you're repeating over and over again, and that's why doing is so important, because the only way you're going to know really what that 20% is if you're actually trying to implement something. If you have some goal in mind, you're trying to create something. If you're not trying to create anything, and then I just give you a book, and then you're supposed to guess what the 20% that is important, that's going to give you 80% of the results is, you have no idea. But if I say, hey, look, here's this book on JavaScript, and I want you to create an application that does this, or here's some exercises to do, you know, I want you to do this thing, then as you're trying to do that, and you're looking up information and you're solving your problems, you're quickly seeing, oh, okay, I actually need to know this is the stuff that I need to know in order to do this, and it's going to be repeated enough that you'll have an idea of what you actually need to learn, because you know, ideally, again, with that 20%, the idea behind that is that the stuff that you use, the 20% that you use 80% of the time, is the stuff that you want to devote the cycles, you know, the time to actually learn and have in your head. But that other 80%, you just want to know about it so you can look it up, because it's a waste of time to memorize that kind of stuff. when we can easily look it up. But the stuff that you do every time, like for example, like in another context, another situation, knowing the denominations of coins. Pretty important, right? You don't have to know, how to do complex math, calculations and financial derivatives and all this stuff, but every single day you're going to look at the face value of coins, and so if you have to look it up every time, if you're like, oh, what is a quarter or a peso or whatever, whatever the denomination is, and you say, and you don't know it, that's going to be a problem. But if you know that, since you know that you're using it all the time, that has to be something that you memorize. So that's why I say that, and again, it's very contextual. It's very much you get a feel for it, but the only way to get a feel for it is by doing, because the more that you do, then you're like, oh, okay, I keep on repeating this thing, I keep on having to look it up, that's something I better learn.
Yeah, and I think that that have a relation with the course of yours, learning mistakes, because you mentioned that we waste a lot of time in books instead of doing things. I think that's related to find out the percentage you need to know in order to be able to learn that knowledge by doing.
Exactly. Yeah. I think we tend to I think traditional education systems tend to make us afraid to fail a little bit. So we tend to want to know, we don't want to fail our way forward. And failing your way forward is really important, especially when learning something new and working with new technology, because you got to make mistakes and you learn from the mistakes and you go forward, rather than if you try to get it all perfect up front, then you end up reading books cover to cover and you don't know what's good and you don't know what's important, what you're supposed to learn, and you're going to make mistakes anyway. So it's better to feel your way through it and get to that point, especially today. Today we live in a world where at our fingertips we have Google and we have so much information. So I think it used to be maybe 50 years ago that someone would have to memorize a lot more information, that they would have to have that information at their hands, their kind of rote memorization, whereas today it's all about optimizing what you actually keep it, because you can't keep it all in your head. You've got so much space. You got to optimize what that is, and then know how to look up the other information. We're more the more valuable skill is being able to find information and be able to use that when you need it.
There you have it, Yesenia. Do you have any other questions? Thank you, John. Do you have any other questions for John? While before I interrupt everyone, so that I can throw in a little ad here.
Well, it will be related with your last answer. What are the most learning barriers, the most hard learning barriers that you have, and how do you get through them?
You said the most difficult
Learning barriers, like
Learning barrier? You mean learning
barriers?
barriers?
Yeah, that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. A little parenthesis. Yesenia, if you could get your mic a little closer to your mouth, maybe that would help, because there's some background
Okay.
noise filtering in.
Is it
Thank
better
you.
now?
I think it is, so let's give it a try. So, okay,
Okay.
learning barriers. So there
Yeah.
you have it, John.
So, I think probably the biggest learning barrier is, and I stumble on this one all the time, even still, is not believing that I can do it. Is not being able to see myself as, I think whenever I pick up something new, I tend to think it seems so hard, and I seem so far away from it, and I forget about all the things that I am a master at now, that I learned that I didn't know anything about, and I had no idea how to learn about it. So I think it's, and it comes from the fear of the unknown. We're all, actually there. We can't fear anything we know. We fear what we don't know, right? And so when we don't know what it is we don't know, when we don't know, what the steps are exactly to learn something, we tend to fear that. And so I think that's the biggest barrier, and that's the barrier that stops a lot of people from learning, because a lot of people think, oh, well, I can't do that. I can't become, good at this. I can't learn this particular technology or or programming language, and so they have a disbelief in it, and so they don't actually give it their effort, or they don't try as hard as they can. Instead, you know, and the way to really overcome that barrier is to look at things that you can do that other people would be amazed that you can do, right? That or things that you would be amazed that you could do today. You know, there's plenty of those things. I look at a lot of the things. You know, at one point in time, I said I had no idea how you could possibly create a business online, and it just terrified me. I had no, you know, concept of how to do it, and now I'm doing it. Now I'm having success at it, and so that when I look back and I think about that, I say, wow, well, what can't I conquer? What can't I learn? If I could learn this, and this is, you know, at least in my mind at that time, it seemed so complicated. Now it seems so simple. That's a good reminder. Is, you know, you just check yourself and say, what are the things that were really hard, but now they're so simple to me, and whatever I'm trying to tackle now, whatever that thing I'm trying to learn now is, it's the same way. In 30 days, in 60 days, or whatever it is, a year from now, I'm going to look back and I'm going to think how simple this is, you know, and that's really the truth for most things. So.
Thank you, John.
There you have it, Yesenia. Thank you again, John, for your response. Okay, I have a couple of questions of my own, if I may, of course.
Oh, sure.
Okay, but before, let me just pause for 1 second. I just want to remind the audience that, first of all, I want to show something off here. This is going to be our new logo, and which was created by our great designer, in-house designer, Axel. And thank you for this, Axel. Okay. The audience, if you have any questions for John, feel free to submit them by means of clicking on the prompt, on the Q&A prompt that you will see on your screen, which is on the lower left-hand side. Click where it says, be part of the conversation. Click there, and then you'll see a Q&A prompt. Send us your questions. We'll read them off to John, and of course, you'll get your response. So again, be part of the conversation. That's the link where you need to click in order to send us your question. That's how you can interact with us. And with that being said, I want to go back to my question. All right, John, here's the thing. Of course, please, as I mentioned before, and my question is, the context of my question is from a standpoint of a non-engineer, because I'm not an engineer. Okay, and also based on your blog and your page, and I perceive that you are also addressing not only developers, but also other types, other profiles, other types of professionals. Could be people who want to become entrepreneurs, or just folks who have a lot of crazy ideas about a whole bunch of things that they want to try out and start, which would be my case. Okay, so one of the main messages that you convey here is that you seem to be very focused on making things, or making the complex simple,
Right.
as a way to become successful. My question to you, John, is this: is there a shortcut to make the complex simple?
It's oftentimes it's a longer route to make the complex simple. It's easier for things to be complicated, right? It takes a little bit more eloquence, I think, to make things simple. You know, I think if it were easy to make the complex simple, then, you know, then we wouldn't have so many complicated things, especially in the software development world, right? In fact, that was kind of the thing that motivated me to really create the blog. Was I was tired of developers that were sort of higher level than me, or you know, or my peers, that were just like making things so hard, and it was discouraging people, because it's not that hard, right? I mean, there's nothing that's really, really hard. That's what I've learned, is that everything that you could think of that you could learn, that someone could do, you know, some of the things are difficult, but they're not really that complex. When you break things down, and that's really what, you know, as developers, when we write code, what we do is we take something that's sort of like this really big problem, and we break it down into, okay, well, can I just make it so that the button clicks, or, you know, and we break it down, until we get to the single line of code. And when you look at one line of code, it's always simple. One line of code is never complicated, right? And so, but life is like that too, you know, because when we take our problems and we break them down and we say, you know, what is this really composed of? You know, it's this, this, and this, and each one of those steps is simple, but it is, you know, it does take some time. It takes a little bit more thought to take something and condense it down and see what is the essence of this, and you know, how can I explain this in a way that's an analogy that someone's going to instantly understand, rather than making something very, very complicated. So yeah, so I think it actually, you know, takes more time, but I think if there was a shortcut, if there is like a formula for making the complex simple, what I would say that it is it's looking at a problem and breaking it down into the components, you know, because most big problems, most big things we're trying to tackle can be broken down into smaller things, and then and keep breaking that down until you find something that's simple, and then you know, and then is there some parallel that you can draw that when you've broken it down that far, that suddenly reduces it to a whole level of simplicity that didn't exist before. A lot of problems, when we break them down, we find that, oh, it's actually there's this real simple, clear-cut solution here, but when we look at it as this big problem, we don't see that. But once we break it down, then we can see things a little bit clearer.
Does it apply to software development as well?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the biggest struggles I think that most beginning software developers have is that they don't have this skill yet. They don't know, they see a big problem and they look at it as the big problem. They don't look at it as what are the, you know, how can I decompose this into simple steps that can, and can I do all those steps? Because you don't need a very big toolbox to be able to do just about anything in programming, right? In software development, you only need a very few simple constructs. In fact, if we break things all the way down to the lowest level, it's just zeros and ones. It's either on or off. That's all it is. But you know, this or that. It's just a binary choice, but we have to break things down to that level. So that's it's one of the most critical skills, I think, for software developers, but it's also one of the more difficult ones to grasp. You know, but over time, you know, all good developers learn how to in some way take a complicated problem and simplify it down.
Okay, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, by the way. Okay, one more, if I may, and I want to remind the audience that today we're talking about how to learn anything quickly and everything that it comprises. We're talking about a whole bunch of stuff regarding how to learn anything quickly, both on the software development side and also in other areas. Okay, I have one more final question of my own, and then we'll move on to the audience's questions. John, let's just picture this, a hypothetical situation. Let's say that, and then you'll see where I'm coming from when I ask you this question.
Okay.
Let's hypothetically, let's suppose that you have two celebrities sitting in front of each other. Let's say you have Uncle Bob, and then you have Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Okay.
What can developers learn from Arnold Schwarzenegger that cannot learn from Uncle Bob, and vice versa?
That's an interesting question. Well, you know, I mean,
well, you talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, definitely one of the things, you know, I'm a big fan of Arnold, and one of the things that I learned from him that he's really taught me is the power of believing, you know, in things that might seem impossible. When you look at his story, I saw this short that he did on ESPN, like this 30-minute clip on just like on his philosophy in life. And you know, he did a lot of impossible things. He at one point said that, you know, he had this really heavy accent, and he was going to go to America, and he was going to become a film star, and everyone laughed at him. But he believed this, and he believed that he was going to become, you know, have the best physique in the world, and he believed all these things. And he went and he made them happen because he believed them. And you know, I think that's something that I think a lot of we can be jaded today in the
Hmm.
world, and we can believe that we have to settle and that we can't accomplish anything. As a kid, we were told, oh, you could do whatever you want, but we don't really believe that, and it because our parents don't really believe that, because everyone sort of says that, and they say, yeah, you can be whatever you want, but you better go to school and get good grades and get a job. But that's not true. That's really not true. Actually, the reality is you can do it. It's just that most people don't believe, and sometimes the people that, and even if you do believe, there's a second part to that equation, which is to have the commitment and follow through, to work hard, to actually to keep going. In face of overwhelming odds, in face of failure, to push on past that. A lot of people hit their first trip on the road and they give up and they don't keep on pushing on. So I think Arnold is just a great example of that, because look at what he's done. He's gone from from a poor city in Austria to becoming the Mr. Olympia, to a movie star, to the governor of California, right? I mean, how amazing, right? This guy was able to accomplish all of these things. So I think that's one thing that you can learn from Arnold. From Bob, from Uncle Bob, one of the things that I really learned from him, that I find is valuable, is the adaptation. Like I mean, here he is. He's been coding his whole career, and he's adapted to technology. There's a lot of famous programmers that I'm not going to name names because I don't want to call them out, but they've sort of faded away into oblivion, because they used to be, these were the guys that I read their books and admired and looked up to, and where are they now? You barely hear of them. And it's because they didn't adapt. They didn't change with the technology. They didn't have the ability to keep changing and keep on following the path forward. So I think Uncle Bob is a great example of that, of just the adaptability. And and the other piece that I'd say from him is what he teaches is principles. And I think that's something that applies in software development. It applies in life. Is when you base your knowledge and when you base what you do on principles rather than techniques or strategies, they last forever, because principles are universal, because principles never fade away, because principles are the cornerstone. They're the things that make up the foundations of the world of programming, of everything that we do. And so Bob really has focused, and he's written books, and he's built his whole career on principles. And regardless of the technology, regardless of where things go, those principles, or at least most of those principles, are still going to apply, because they're deeper than just some technique or the hot technology of the day.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You know, John, as I was listening to you, and let me back to the Arnold Schwarzenegger example. And by the way, for the audience out there, the reason why I mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger is because this is a piece that was created also by John here in his blog Simple Programmer, which is called What Software Developers Can Learn from Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I encourage you to take a peek at right on his blog simpleprogrammer.com.
Oh, actually, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Oh
I
yeah,
just want to make
please,
sure.
please, yeah.
So I actually did not write that piece. That's a guest poster on my by Saeed
Saeed
Gaston.
Gatson. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Please, audience, my apologies. For some reason, I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry. Please forgive me for that
Oh, it's
blooper. But
fine. Both
yeah,
me and him are both fans of Arnold, so I'm glad to.
guest post.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, I should have worn my glasses. It's kind
Oh,
of
sorry. Sorry.
a tiny little type. Okay, Saeed Gatson, yes, but it's right there on simpleprogrammer.com. You should take a peek at it. And it pulled my attention immediately. It's like, I mean, what software developers can learn from Arnold Schwarzenegger? You never would imagine that uh, software developers or non-software developers like myself could learn anything from Schwarzenegger. And I think I get the point. But is there a takeaway for this, John, as far as learning something from Schwarzenegger? For example, um, I believe that from what I'm reading here in this post, this post is encouraging folks to devote all of your energy, and I'm just reading off of the post here. Devote all of your energy to doing one thing, right?
Mhm.
However, in the technology world, I believe from what I've seen here, especially here among my fellow Softians, is, I mean, you have to stay up to date in a whole bunch of technologies, a lot of things that are going on, that are new things, new technologies are popping out every day. So, what what's the balance for this? I mean, can you just focus on one thing and then forget the rest, or you want to try to cover everything? So, where's the balance for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a big struggle I think that a lot of developers have. You know, I always recommend that a developer specialize, right? To have something that you specialize in. I think that's a really important marketing tool. I think it's something. It also, just looking at it from the other angle, from the Arnold angle, having your focus not diverted or dispersed. That's what I'm looking for. Is very valuable because you can hit something harder, you can go deeper with it, but at the same time you have to have a fairly broad base, right? So what I usually recommend for developers is that they have a fairly broad base, but they pick one specialty to go after at a time, and they go really deep in that specialty and focus on that specialty, because that's what's really going to make a difference in your career and is going to set you apart. And you can't know it all, right? You can't learn it all today. I mean, sometimes I used to wish that I was a programmer back in the 80s, because then I could learn it all. But I know even then there was probably too much, right? The reality of the situation is that today there's no way. You can't keep up. So don't even try to keep up. Instead, pick something that you're going to do really well and do that really well. Now, you're going to have to know certain things. You're going to have a base knowledge, of course, but pick a specialty and pick a focus, and go that direction and go deep, because that's how you become great. You can't become, no one today is going to become a renaissance man of, a polymath that is going to be great at multiple things, at everything. You just can't do it. There's just too much stuff. So instead, you got to have the core, you got to have the basics, you got to know, have a broad base, and that base can expand over time. But you got to also have a focus in something that you're going for hard, and that you're gonna get a very deep knowledge of. Otherwise, you're just going to be like everyone else, and you're not going to have anything that's going to set you apart or going to really define your value.
Okay, well, absolutely. Okay, I'd like to move on to the audience. We have a question by one of our fellow Nearsoftians here, Dan Valle. Dan is asking you, John, the following: what would be the top things to do to consider yourself to be proficient in software development? So I'll leave you with that question, and as far as I'm concerned, I'll be back.
So to be proficient in software development, I guess it really depends on what you define proficient as. But what I'm going to define it as, to me, to be proficient is, I would say that you can build an app end to end, right? You can create something. For my whole test, I remember being a kid and wanting to be a programmer and feeling like I wasn't proficient until I could create something on my own. I made my first app, and I had built the whole thing, not just the user interface, not just the back end piece, because I'd get my first few jobs as a software developer, I didn't feel proficient because they had me working on this little piece of a thing, and I was like, well, if I don't feel like I'm proficient unless I can build an entire thing myself. And so I think a good test for it is, can you build something? Can you actually build an application from start to finish, the entire thing yourself? It doesn't have to be a huge application. A lot of times, to encourage developers, I'll have them do mobile apps, because you can build a fairly small mobile app. That's something that just one developer can do on their own, and that kind of proves your proficiency, because you're able to do all the things from creating the user interface to creating the logic behind it, to using data if you're using a database, and taking input and displaying things on the screen, all the kind of components that you need, I'd say, to be proficient. So that's how I define it, is if you can build an app in your chosen technology, then you're proficient. Other people, will have different levels of standards that they would call proficient.
Okay. There you have it, Dan. Thank you for your question, and I hope that has been answered to your satisfaction. And if not, just send us another one, and we'll take it. And I also want to remind the audience to please send us their questions. We still have plenty of time. Well, actually, we have about 20 minutes, so feel free to send us your questions, and we'll go to them as soon as we get them. Okay, let me go back to Yesenia and Janet. Okay, wait a minute. Yesenia and Janet, sorry to interrupt, but I have another one question from the audience, okay? And this is from another fellow near Softians. He's right there in Hermosillo, and he's from our good Alfonso Arita. And he's been with Nearsoft for ages, even way before I got there. Okay, Alfonso is asking the following, John. Is it within your plans to create more content in the plural site platform? If so, what would be the courses? What would the courses be about?
I wish I had either a few more of me, or I could have more time in the day, because there's so many things I want to do. There's so many things I want to do. At this point, I sort of have come to this point where I have to decide what is the best use of my time. Like what is, and really, I know this might sound a little bit cheesy, but we could be cheesy, right? You put on Arnold glasses over there.
Talk about cheesy. Well, I look cheesy, but okay.
But I think, what is my unique gift that I can bring? How can I provide the most value? And at first, I thought it was producing technical content, and maybe it was, but I don't think that's what it is anymore. As I find deeper, as I find what really is the value that I bring, I think it's in the non-technical content. I think it's in bringing, the more holistic approach to software developers, to helping them to succeed in other areas of their life, and to achieve what they want to achieve. So with that, the reason why I say that is because I don't know. I mean, maybe I will end up creating more technical content for Pluralsight, but right now I've got so much to do in this space. There's so many things that I feel like I can help with, and that I feel passionate about doing, that I'm not. It's not on my radar to do that. If I do create another Pluralsight course in the near future, it would probably actually be one that sort of mirrored my soft skills book, where I go over some of the soft skills. I also, to caveat that a little bit more, I feel like there's a lot of knowledge out there, technical knowledge. I don't feel like we're lacking in training. Maybe not all the training is the best training, but if you want to learn a programming language or learn some technology today, there's a lot of resources. It's not like how it was, 10 years ago when it was scarce and it was very difficult. So I feel like what there isn't out there right now is for software developers to say, well, how can I advance my career better? How can I get along with management better? How can I, achieve my goals? How can I be more productive? All these other aspects of life that sometimes we can neglect as developers, as engineers, because we're so focused on the code, on accomplishing things, and all these other things fall away. So that's where my focus really is, and that's where I feel like I can provide the greatest contribution. So that's, at least right now, that's where I see myself going.
Excellent. Alrighty then. Thank you again, John, for your response. And okay, Janet, I believe that you have a little something for us from the audience, right, Janet?
That's right.
All right, go ahead.
Thanks. We had a question from Pedro Rojas. He's a software developer at Nearsoft. And the question is, what to do when you have to learn a lot of stuff and you have a deadline very soon? And also, if you could give us a couple of advices.
Sure. You just have to have a lot of caffeine and not sleep.
Agree.
That shouldn't be a problem here in Nearsoft.
No. When you have a deadline and you have to learn a lot of things, is you've got to focus on what's important. Again, this comes down to, a lot of people, they want to learn something, they grab a book and they want to read that book. That's not how you do it. You got to figure out what do you actually need to know, and you got to work backwards. You got to say, what do I want to accomplish? And from what do I want to accomplish, that's how I know what I need to know. Is I need to know enough to accomplish that thing. You can't. I think of it this way, right? When you fly in an airplane, you get nowadays you don't. Do you even get one carry-on? Well, you get a carry-on, right? You bring your bag, right? You can only put so much in that bag. You can't prepare for every situation. You can't bring everything. You got to bring what's essential, what's necessary for that trip. And sometimes, when we approach learning, a lot of developers are like, well, what if I need to know this? What if I need to know that? And they're packing their bag. They have 5 suitcases full of stuff that they want to bring with them for this small trip. You got to be smart enough to say, okay, what is essential? What do I actually need? What am I actually going to use? And that's where it comes to, what am I trying to do? Because that's going to tell you what you actually need to use, and that's the tools that you're going to bring. That's how you're going to know how to pack your carry-on, and you bring that. So that's how you apply it, to learning. Is you say, we can't. There's no magic. There's no secret that's going to just make it so that you can learn all this stuff. The biggest thing that's going to give you the biggest bang for the buck is to narrow it down, to go back to what I was saying at the beginning, which is to reduce that scope down to what is it that you actually need to learn. What is it that you can look up easily? You don't need to learn that stuff, right? And figuring that out, and not trying to account for every single thing, and being okay with having an incomplete knowledge. Right? It's scary to have an incomplete knowledge, to say, well, I don't know what I would do in that situation, but trust yourself. You'll figure it out. You can do just-in-time learning. You have to have the basics, and you got to get that down so that you can be proficient. But then for all the other things, you can just-in-time learn what you need to learn, and you have to. It's an agile process, right? It's agile learning instead of learning big upfront learning. We're learning as we go as much as possible, because things change, right, so rapidly. So you don't want to invest too much into one, into making all those suitcases full of stuff that you might not ever use.
Okay, makes sense. And that's a really good example. Thanks for your answer, and thanks for your question, Pedro.
Alrighty then, and thank you, Janet. Also, but do we have another one, Janet, on your end?
I do, but on my own.
No, from the audience.
No, I'm done. So
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. We still have a few minutes left. I just want to make clarify that we still have 2 questions from the audience. So if it's okay, unless Yesenia, if you have any other questions on your own, then I'd like to. Do you have one, or can we move on to the?
I have one related to what John was saying before about you want to do a lot of things and you wish you have more time. So we live in this busy world, and we always have things to learn, especially as developers. How do you achieve work-life balance?
I love that question. So, I'm a little bit of a heretic on this one, but I believe that the best way to achieve work-life balance is to not draw the line so distinct. I think it's a false dichotomy that we've created, that there's work and there's life. We can't live for the weekends, right? So many people live for the weekends. They go and they do their job, and maybe even if they like their job, but then they can't wait to get home, and then they can. And some people fall into this where they're like, okay, well, I just got to make it to lunchtime, and then I get my lunch break, and that's the fun part of my day, and then I got to make it, so many more hours, and then they get to go home and I get to watch TV, and that's me time. That's kind of a sad way to live life, because you spend most of your time at work or sleeping. So if you're not enjoying your life, that sucks. I don't want to do that. And when we do the work-life balance, we tend to do it that way. It's like work is bad and life is good. Well, it's it can be integrated a little bit more. And you're back in the day. I think it's different in the society that we live in today. But I would imagine that back when there were blacksmiths, I don't think the blacksmith was like, well, okay, I'm blacksmith now, and now when at 5 o'clock or dusk at dusk, I'm not blacksmith, right? It's me. I'm going to watch some Netflix. Instead, he's always the blacksmith, or the doctor is always the doctor, and that's part of their identity and part of their role, and they enjoy that, and that's part of their life. So really, I'm not saying like work, be a workaholic and work all the time. I'm just saying that let that be part of your life. Let that be you. You should enjoy it, and you can have fun. That can be fun as well, doing work and being at work, and because that's if you make it more part of you and more part of what you're about, instead of trying to draw that line, then then it becomes more fun, and it becomes every moment can become enjoyable instead of just the moments when you get home or the weekends. So yeah, that's my answer for that one.
A great one. Thank you.
There you have it. Hey, that was an excellent question and an excellent answer. Janet, Yesenia, do you know if we have any openings in people development? We should hire John. Alrighty. Okay, 2 questions from the audience. The first one is from Ricardo Mendoza. Ricardo says, in order to start to learn something, we have to break all in small steps. How do you know where to start and how to set the scope of each?
So yeah, so that in order to set the scope and where to start, it really comes with, I'll kind of go through my process a little bit, because I've got a 10-step process to learn, and it really starts with getting the big picture, right? Before you got to get rid of some of those unknowns, right? You got to say, well, this big thing that I'm trying to learn, what is it about? Like, let me just find out a little bit of information. Let's say I'm trying to learn a programming language. What's the basis of this? Who made this language, and what's kind of the way that they intended it to be used? And what does the edges of it look? How big is this thing? Is it this big, or is it this big, right? I got to know that. So it starts with that. And then the next question you ask yourself is, what am I trying to do with this? What am I actually trying to accomplish? And I keep going back to this because this is so important, is what are you trying to do? Every time you're trying to learn, it should be, I am learning this so I can do blank, and you need to have a blank. If you don't have a blank, then it's just fun. There's another way of learning, which is just absorbing things for fun. But this type of learning, when we're trying to actually learn a technology or something, it's for a purpose. So when you figure out what the purpose is, that narrows the scope a huge amount, right? Because if I said I want to learn, let's say, C#, right? That's a fairly big language if I don't know anything about it. But if I said I want to develop a web application in C#, okay, now the scope just got narrowed down, because there's a certain amount of the language that I need to know. It might have actually expanded in some areas, because now I need to know a web framework or something. So maybe then I look at that and say, well, how big is that? That seems kind of big. Could I dice it down further, and could I make it? Could I have a smaller goal and learn that, and then that could be part of the bigger goal? So you kind of approach it very strategically, right? Because a lot of people, what they do is they say, well, I want to learn C#, so let me go grab a book on C# and I'll just start reading. And there's no strategy to that. Instead, what I'm saying takes a little bit more work up front, but you got to look and say, okay, well, how can I make this, scope this down to actually accomplish what I want to do in the time frame that I have, what can be done, just like planning any kind of other project. And so that's how you sort of figure out and reduce the scope. But then another good technique is to go and so you kind of figured out the big picture, you've kind of narrowed down the scope and figured out what your goal is, what you're trying to accomplish, and then you kind of want to go to this point of looking at resources. What did other people think was important? One thing whenever I'm trying to learn something is I'll look at the table of contents of a bunch of books on the subject, or courses online or something, and I'll see what did everyone else think was important to learn. And that's a really good way to know what the basics are, what the key, that 20% we talked about earlier is, and that can kind of give you some steps. It doesn't mean that you follow it perfectly, but if there's 10 books on the subject and 5 of those books have the same exact sequence of steps to learn particular thing, then that's probably a good indicator that those are probably important things that you need to learn, and probably in that order, because 5 different people chose to write about the same way, unless they copied each other, right? So that's really the thing, it's a bit of an art. Like the more that you do this, most people aren't used to actively like strategizing about how to learn something. Like I said, most people, they just say, I want to learn this thing, so they go grab a book or they go watch a tutorial on the thing, instead of actually thinking about how to scope it down and how to figure out what to learn and what steps that I need to learn it in. And again, it's something that's very subjective to what you're learning, but I do feel like if you take the time to do that, it will become it becomes fairly obvious in most cases in what the step. It's just that most people haven't actually taken the time to do that, and it's a little bit awkward at first. But once you get used to it, I mean, I was honestly getting to the point when I was doing Pluralsight courses where I would learn, I would flip around a course from knowing nothing about a technology to having a recorded, edited, finished 3-hour course on that subject in 2 weeks' time. And I got a system in place, and I know it's repeatable, and I know anyone can do it, because I know it's something that you can get good at, because I did it, because I got good at it, because I was able to then go take a technology, figure out, okay, what do I actually need to learn to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish with this, and what are the steps, and breaking it down and strategizing ahead of time, because I was on the deadline. I had to do it in that time frame. So I would say, the big message here is just take the time up front to plan it out. If you plan it out, you're gonna know what to do. So.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you again, John. John, a quick question. You tell me how we're doing with your time and your availability, because number one, we still have a few minutes left, but we would either need to choose either between. I mean, if you have the time, we can stretch it a little bit, but we have 2 more questions from the audience. But I'd like to leave some time for you to talk about. I think you were going to share something with our audience today, right? So some links and some other material that you're working on. So do we have time for that, or would you like me to send you the questions and then we can take care of them later, or publish them on our website? How would you like to go about this? Do you have time for this?
Oh sure, yeah. I'm happy to give some more time.
Okay, great. Yeah, it'll be just a couple more minutes, because we have 2 more questions from the audience, and let's go ahead and do the first one. This one is from our fellow Nearsoftian, Isaac Cepeda. He's in Hermosillo too, and Isaac says, "What was the most difficult or hard or the more time-consuming Pluralsight course you did, and why?"
God, I'm gonna actually have to look at my courses to figure that out. I'm trying to think what was the most difficult one. That's a good question. Okay, so I know what was probably the most time-consuming one. What's the most difficult though? Well, I could tell you what the most time-consuming one was for sure.
Sure.
I did this course on building your first game for Android and the PC using Java, and for that one, I basically wrote a script. I made it into a game itself, so it's a little. I did different voices, and I recorded other people doing different voices and different characters, and I made it into like a story. The whole course is sort of a story, and you're playing through this game as you're learning how to create a game. And so that one definitely took the longest amount of time, a disproportionate amount of time to the value it produced for me, but it was fun. I had a lot of fun with it. So that one, putting that level of production in there was took a lot more time.
Excellent. Isaac, there you have it, sir. And one more by Ivan Rascon. What was the most difficult or hard or time consuming Pluralsight course you did, and why?
Okay. So, thank you, John, for being here. And one more. Thank you, John, for being here. And one more. Ivan Rascon. What was the most difficult or hard or time consuming Pluralsight course you did, and why?
Ivan asks you, he says, we have more information that we can learn in our entire life. Keeping this in mind, what do you recommend to get specialized in a few topics or learn all about the interesting programming knowledge that exists? I mean, what should we learn quickly?
Okay, so this goes back to, so you should have a specialization for yourself, right? Just for marketing purposes so that you have value, and you should definitely pick something, it doesn't matter what it is, but learn it deeply, because that's valuable. But when we talk about in general, like, so I want to learn things that are, again, going back to what I talked about with Bob Martin, principles, because those things are timeless, right? These are the things, writing good code. I spent a lot of time learning how to write good code. Bob Martin has some excellent books. His Clean Code book, right, is one of my favorite books because it taught me how to write good code. Code Complete, also by Steve McConnell, helped me to learn how to write good code. And that I've used those skills that I learned in 10 different programming languages, right? Because that's where, that time that I spent learning that, it never gets dated. It's always going to be valuable no matter what new programming languages come out. Learning how to write clear, concise code and the principles that are involved in engineering that construction of the code, those are invaluable. So you should definitely spend time on those, as many things as possible. Again, in life in general, right? Not just in code, not just in the technical aspect. What are the timeless principles that we can learn about life? Right? What are the things? I spend a lot of time. I did this post on like the 55 books I read last year, and someone commented and they said, "John, you have a lot of self-development, like self-help books on there. I don't see why you would need to read all those self-help books." And my answer is because those are the things that like are so universal. Those are the things I'm going to use in every aspect of my life. If I know how to achieve, how to set goals and achieve goals, what can I do, right? I mean, it applies everywhere, right? So I try to spend my time on the things that are principles that apply to a much larger scope of things. So I think that's that's important, and that also brings you outside of the engineering aspect, and that's why I focus so much on soft skills, because I think soft skills are universal. Those are the things that you're going to use your entire life. If you switch careers and you get out of software development, you're still going to use the soft skills that you learn, right? The communication skills, people skills, those type of things, even productivity skills, right? Those are things that are going to be very universal. So I would say that you want to have a two-pronged approach to summarize here. One prong is you need to specialize. You pick some technology and you go deep with that so that you have an expertise. You should always be an expert in something at some given time, right? And then the second one is that the rest of your knowledge, as much as possible, try to learn principles. Try to learn universal things that are not going to be dated. A lot of developers make the mistake and they're like, well, I know JavaScript, all these JavaScript frameworks, and I know all these programming, and they know all these technologies, and as the years progress, that time that they spent, it stops having a return. It has a negative return because those technologies get dated and technology moves forward, and so they become useless skills. Whereas someone who's devoted a good amount of their time to timeless things, to principles, to writing good code, to good engineering practices, to architecture practices, those people, that time that they spent, it pays them back tenfold over the course of their life, over the course of their career, because those things don't change. Those things, there's maybe different ways that they're applied, but they don't change. So, so that's how I would divide my time, and that's how I do divide my time.
Great, John. That was excellent, by the way. And alrighty, John, we have right now it's 6:03, and if you want to go ahead and talk to us about, I think you shared a link with me at the very beginning of our prior to the broadcast. So that now I'd like to hand over the mic to you and share that whatever it is you want to share with our audience. Feel free. Now is your time. Go ahead.
Sure, sure. So I wanted to really leave this open to the Q&A because I think that's pretty valuable. But
Okay.
so we didn't go too much into the program I have. I've actually got a course called 10 Steps to Learn Anything Quickly. And I put together an email course on the 5 learning mistakes software developers make. These are, it's kind of funny. There's one of the lessons is a video, there's a bonus 6 one is a video of me talking about the mistakes that I made. All these are mistakes that I made, right? This is so I've got that information out there. The 5 learning mistakes are free. It's a free email course that I think can be useful. And then it has it has some information about how to get if you want to buy the 10 steps course, which is I think is probably my best-selling course now. But you can get there if you just go to simpleprogrammer.com/dojo. And you can just sign up, put your email in there, and then I'll send you the 5 lessons, and it'll also send you a link to that 10 steps course. But yeah, in that the 10 steps course, I cover an actual 10-step process that I use. You don't have to use the exact 10 steps, but we talked about some of the things like getting the bigger picture, defining the scope down. But one of the things we didn't talk about, which I'll just rant on for a second here or riff on, is teaching, right? So if I want to leave your audience with one thing, I would say that one of the best things that you can possibly do if you want to learn is to teach. Because when you teach something, this is again, and it goes, Carlos, into what you're talking about making the complex simple, is in order to teach, you have to make the complex simple, right? You have to go through that mental process of simplifying something. You may think you have it in your head, but if you really want to solidify your learning in anything, you teach it to someone else, and then you will really understand it, because it will force you to reorganize the information when you take it out, and when you put it out into the world, it'll reorganize it in your own mind, and that will create a deeper knowledge. And that's where I believe that you don't truly understand something until you teach it. But once you teach it, it solidifies and you never forget it. So I would definitely, that's part of the 10 steps. It's the final step is actually teach, but it's one of the most important steps, I think, and it's a step that a lot of people ignore because they feel like they're not qualified, or they feel like they don't have the authority to teach. But to that, I would say that you only have to be one step ahead of someone in order for you to teach them. So you can always help someone, even if you're just one step ahead. So yeah, so if you want to check all that out, simpleprogrammer.com/dojo.
Perfect. Simple. There you have it, folks. Simpleprogrammer.com/dojo. And alrighty then. Well, John, I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for having agreed to be here with us today, and also Janet and Yesenia. I really appreciate your being here too. I think your contribution certainly made a difference here today. So thank you, the 3 of you. John, by the way, in case I didn't mention it, I think I did, but just in case, we'll be sending you a couple of very nice non-digital tokens of appreciation. And I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's going to be a surprise. It's a little thing that I cannot email, but I'm going to be FedExing to you soon, probably in the next couple of days or so. Alrighty then. If there's nothing else, then again, thank you, and thank you everyone, and especially the audience for being here with us. Remember, DojoLIVE, this is going to be our new logo soon, so keep an eye out for this. It's going to be all over the place. And again, John, thank you so much. We're going to be in touch, John. And Janet, Yesenia, thank you. Love you all.
Thank you. It's an honor.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you
there
for
you have
having
it.
me.
Have an excellent afternoon, John. Janet and Yesenia.
All right.
Goodbye.
Take care. Nice to meet you.
Bye.